Hello there, and welcome. It is truly a pleasure to have you here today as we dive into a perspective-shifting exploration of how our internal beliefs shape the very fabric of our lives. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to navigate challenges with a sense of curiosity and resilience, while others feel completely defeated by the slightest setback? Or perhaps you've noticed that some individuals are constantly driven to prove how smart or talented they are, while others are simply focused on getting better. Today, we are exploring a concept that gets to the very heart of these questions. We are looking at the groundbreaking work of Carol S. Dweck, who spent decades researching how our self-conceptions, what she calls our mindsets, determine our success, our relationships, and our overall happiness. The main purpose of this book is to demonstrate that the view you adopt for yourself profoundly affects the way you lead your life. It introduces us to the idea that there are two primary mindsets through which we view the world, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. At a high level, the most important takeaway here is that these mindsets aren't just personality traits, they are fundamental beliefs about the nature of human ability. If you believe your qualities are set in stone, you operate in a world of validation and judgment. If you believe your qualities can be developed, you operate in a world of learning and improvement. Another core idea we will explore is the role of effort and failure. In one mindset, failure is a permanent identity, a sign that you aren't enough. In the other, failure is simply information, a necessary part of the process of getting smarter and more capable. This book shows us that even the most naturally gifted people can hit a wall if they don't cultivate the right mental framework, while those who embrace growth can reach heights that others might have thought impossible. As we move forward, we're going to look at how these mindsets play out in every area of your life, from the classroom and the sports arena to the boardroom and your most personal relationships. It is an enlightening journey that helps us understand not just our own behavior, but the behavior of everyone around us. Before we begin the main summary of these transformative concepts, if you find this information helpful, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to help others discover these insights as well. The Path to Potential, a deep dive into mindset. The two mindsets, validation versus development. At the very core of this book is the distinction between two ways of viewing your own intelligence and personality. The first is the fixed mindset. This is the belief that your qualities are carved in stone. From this perspective, you have a certain amount of intelligence, a certain personality, and a certain moral character, and those things are permanent. When you operate from a fixed mindset, every situation becomes a test of those traits. You feel a constant, urgent need to prove yourself over and over again. If you only have a set amount of intelligence, you'd better make sure you look smart and never look like a failure. This creates a life where you are perpetually seeking validation to confirm that you are adequate. On the other side of the spectrum is the growth mindset. This mindset is based on the belief that your basic qualities are things you can cultivate through your efforts. While people may differ in every which way, in their initial talents and aptitudes, interests, or temperaments, everyone can change and grow through application and experience. For someone in a growth mindset, the goal isn't to look smart or talented right now, it's to become smarter and more talented over time. The focus shifts from am I a success or a failure to am I learning and improving? This distinction is vital because it changes what you value in life. In a fixed mindset, a challenge is a threat because it might reveal a deficiency. In a growth mindset, a challenge is an opportunity because it provides the stimulation needed to grow. It's the difference between wanting to be perfect immediately and wanting to engage in a process of becoming. For example, a student with a fixed mindset might avoid a difficult class because a low grade would prove they aren't smart. A student with a growth mindset would take that same class specifically because it's difficult, seeing the challenge as the exact thing they need to get smarter. Now we move to the next point, which explores how these two mindsets fundamentally alter our relationship with effort and the inevitable experience of failure. Because the fixed mindset views ability as something you either have or you don't, it creates a very strange relationship with effort. In this mindset, if you have to work hard at something, it must mean you aren't very good at it. Genius is supposed to be effortless. To a person in a fixed mindset, effort is actually a sign of weakness. It's for the people who lack natural talent. This is a dangerous trap because it prevents people from ever reaching their full potential. If you believe effort is only for the untalented, you will stop trying the moment things get difficult, effectively capping your own development. In the growth mindset, however, effort is what makes you smart or talented. It is the engine of achievement. Effort isn't a sign of deficiency, it is the path to mastery. This mindset allows people to enjoy what they are doing even when it is difficult, because they see the struggle as proof that they are expanding their abilities. They don't see themselves as finished products, but as works in progress. This leads us to the concept of failure. In a fixed mindset, failure is a label. It defines you. If you fail an exam, lose a job, or get rejected, you become a failure. It is a permanent mark on your character. Because failure is so painful and defining, people in a fixed mindset will often go to great lengths to protect their egos. They might make excuses, blame others, or simply quit to avoid the risk of failing again. But for those with a growth mindset, failure is an action, not an identity. It's a setback, yes, and it can be painful, but it is also a teacher. It provides specific information about what went wrong and what needs to change. Instead of hiding from failure, people with a growth mindset use it as a springboard. A relatable example is an athlete who loses a big game. The fixed mindset athlete might blame the referee or their teammates to avoid feeling like a loser. The growth mindset athlete will study the footage of the game, identify their mistakes, and train harder the next day to fix them. Now we move to the next point, where we see how these internal beliefs translate into the world of high-level achievement and leadership. When we look at successful people, we often fall into the trap of thinking they were simply born that way. We see the natural athlete or the born leader. However, the research shows that a growth mindset is often the hidden ingredient in long-term success. In the world of sports, many of the greatest athletes weren't considered the most talented when they started. They were the ones who worked the hardest, asked for the most feedback, and took the most responsibility for their growth. They didn't rely on talent alone, they relied on the process of improvement. In the business world, the mindset of a leader can determine the fate of an entire company. A fixed mindset leader often feels the need to be the smartest person in the room. They may surround themselves with yes people who won't challenge them, and they might view any critique as a personal attack. This creates a culture of fear where employees are afraid to admit mistakes or suggest new ideas, which eventually leads to stagnation. These leaders are more concerned with their own reputation than the company's long-term health. In contrast, growth mindset leaders aren't trying to prove they are superior. They are focused on learning and helping their team learn. They view their employees as people with potential that can be developed, rather than fixed assets. They encourage risk-taking and see mistakes as part of the innovation process. This creates an environment of collaboration and continuous improvement. Instead of building a pedestal for themselves, they build a culture that allows everyone to rise. For instance, a growth-minded CEO might hold post-mortem meetings after a project fails, not to assign blame, but to openly discuss what the entire team can learn from the experience to ensure the next project is a success. Now we move to the next point, which takes these concepts out of the workplace and into the most intimate areas of our lives, our relationships. Mindsets play a massive role in how we interact with our partners, friends, and family. In a fixed mindset, people often believe that relationships should be perfect and effortless. They think that if two people are meant to be, everything should just work out naturally. If a conflict arises, they see it as a sign that the relationship is flawed or that the other person is fundamentally wrong. Because they believe traits are fixed, they are quick to judge their partners and slow to believe that things can change. If there's a problem, they might feel that this is just who you are, which leads to resentment and a lack of resolution. In a growth mindset, however, a relationship is something that requires work and cultivation. These individuals believe that both people in the relationship can grow and change. They don't expect perfection, they expect a shared journey of development. When a conflict occurs, they don't see it as a deal breaker, but as an opportunity to communicate, understand each other better, and strengthen the bond. They believe that skills like listening, empathy, and patience can be learned and improved over time. This difference in perspective changes the entire dynamic of a partnership. While a person with a fixed mindset might give up on a relationship at the first sign of trouble, viewing the conflict as proof of incompatibility, someone with a growth mindset will lean in. They understand that a long-term, healthy connection isn't something you find, it's something you build through mutual effort and the willingness to evolve together. It's the difference between looking for a perfect partner and being a partner who is willing to grow. Now we move to the next point, looking at how mindsets are passed down from one generation to the next through the way we praise and teach our children. One of the most surprising insights is how we accidentally instill a fixed mindset in children by trying to build their confidence. Many parents and teachers believe that praising a child's intelligence or talent, saying things like "you're so smart" or "you're a natural," will help them feel capable. However, the book explains that this kind of praise actually pushes children into a fixed mindset. When we praise a child for being smart, they hear, "I am valued because I am smart, and if I make a mistake, it must mean I'm not smart anymore." This makes them afraid of challenges because they don't want to lose the smart label. A growth mindset approach to parenting and teaching focuses on praising the process rather than the result or the innate trait. Instead of praising intelligence, we praise effort, strategy, focus, and persistence. For example, instead of saying, "Wow, you got an A, you're so talented at math," a growth-minded parent might say, "I'm so impressed by how hard you studied and the different ways you tried to solve those problems until you got them right." This subtle shift in language tells the child that their success is within their control. It teaches them that their abilities are not fixed qualities they were born with, but muscles they can build through work. When a child learns to value the process of learning over the label of being gifted, they become much more resilient. They aren't crushed by a difficult assignment because they see it as a chance to practice rather than a threat to their identity. This foundation allows them to carry a love for learning and a willingness to take risks into their adult lives. Continuing with our exploration of how these internal frameworks dictate our external reality, we look toward the social sphere, specifically, how mindsets influence how we handle social rejection and the pervasive issue of bullying. In a fixed mindset, social rejection is a judgment on one's worth. When someone with a fixed mindset is rejected, whether by a romantic interest or a peer group, they often feel branded as unlovable or unworthy. Because they view their social appeal as a fixed trait, they don't see the rejection as a situational event, but as a permanent verdict on their character. This often leads to a desire for vengeance. If the rejection proved they are deficient, the only way to feel better is to strike back and prove that the other person is even worse. Dweck's research found that people in a fixed mindset are much more likely to harbor long-term grudges and seek ways to get even because the wound to their ego is so deep and feels so permanent. Conversely, those with a growth mindset view social rejection as a painful but informative experience. They don't see it as a final judgment on their value as a person. Instead, they look at it as a sign that the relationship wasn't a good fit, or that there are things they can learn about how they interact with others. Their goal is not to get revenge, but to understand, forgive, and move on. They are more interested in what they can learn for their next relationship than in dwelling on the pain of the current one. This plays a massive role in the dynamics of bullying. Bullies often operate from a fixed mindset. They need to put others down to feel superior and confirm their own status. Victims who operate from a fixed mindset may internalize the bully's insults, believing that there is something fundamentally wrong with them. However, when schools foster a growth mindset, the focus shifts. Students are taught that social skills are things that can be developed and that a bully's behavior is a reflection of the bully's own psychological state, not the victim's worth. This perspective can drastically reduce the long-term psychological damage of social conflict. Now we move to the next point, which examines how these mindsets aren't just individual traits but can actually define the entire culture of an organization or a company. We previously touched on how leadership is affected by mindset, but it goes deeper than the person at the top. Entire organizations can have a culture of genius or a culture of growth. In a culture of genius, which is the corporate version of a fixed mindset, the company is obsessed with hiring only the top talent. They believe that intelligence is innate and that the goal is to find the smartest people and let them work. While this sounds good in theory, it often leads to a highly competitive and toxic environment. When employees feel they were hired for their genius, they become terrified of making mistakes that would prove they aren't geniuses after all. This leads to information hoarding, internal politics, and a lack of innovation because no one wants to take a risk that might fail. On the other hand, a culture of growth is an organization that prioritizes the development of all its employees. In these companies, talent is seen as a starting point, not the finish line. The organization invests heavily in training, mentorship, and internal mobility. Because everyone is encouraged to learn, there is a much higher level of trust. Employees feel safe admitting when they don't know something or when a project isn't working, which allows the company to pivot and solve problems much faster. Research shows that employees in growth mindset organizations are more committed to their work, more collaborative, and much more likely to say that the company supports innovation. A clear example of this is seen in the history of major corporations. Companies that fell from grace often had leaders who were obsessed with their own fixed image of greatness and refused to listen to feedback that contradicted their vision. Meanwhile, companies that sustained long-term success were often led by people who were constantly asking questions, looking for their own weaknesses, and encouraging their teams to do the same. They didn't want to be the smartest person in the room, they wanted to build the smartest room. Now we move to the next point, which addresses a common misunderstanding that has surfaced as these ideas have become more popular: the false growth mindset. As the concept of the growth mindset has spread through schools and businesses, Carol Dweck noticed a trend where people claimed to have a growth mindset but didn't actually understand the core principles. This is what she calls the false growth mindset. Many people think that a growth mindset simply means being open-minded or being optimistic. Some parents and teachers think it just means praising effort, regardless of the outcome. But simply trying hard is not the whole story. A true growth mindset involves more than just effort, it involves learning from that effort. If a student tries the same unsuccessful strategy over and over again and fails, praising their effort is counterproductive. It's empty praise. A real growth mindset approach would be to praise the effort and the search for new strategies. It's about being resourceful. If what you are doing isn't working, a growth mindset doesn't mean you just try harder at the same thing. It means you look for a new way to solve the problem, seek help, or find better tools. Furthermore, a false growth mindset often involves people using the terminology to hide their fixed mindset behaviors. A manager might say they have a growth mindset but then get angry when an employee makes a mistake. Or a teacher might say they believe all children can learn, but then act as if some students are lost causes. Understanding that we all have a mix of fixed and growth mindsets is the first step toward genuine growth. We all have triggers that send us back into a fixed mindset, like criticism, a high-stakes challenge, or seeing someone else who is more successful, and the goal isn't to pretend those triggers don't exist, but to recognize them and work through them. Now we move to the next point, where we dive deeper into the world of sports and the concept of character, which Dweck redefines through the lens of mindset. In the sports world, we often talk about character as some mysterious, innate quality that certain athletes have. We say someone has the heart of a champion. Dweck argues that what we are actually seeing is the growth mindset in action. In sports, talent can only take an athlete so far. There are countless stories of natural athletes who dominated in high school or college but fizzled out in the pros. Why? Because their fixed mindset made them believe they shouldn't have to work hard. When they finally met opponents who were just as talented as they were, they didn't have the character, the growth mindset, to dig deeper and improve. True character in sports is the ability to maintain your focus and your effort even when things are going poorly. It's the athlete who, after a crushing defeat, is the first one back in the gym the next morning. It's the player who is willing to change their technique, even if they've been doing it the same way for years, because they know the change will make them better in the long run. Dweck highlights that the greatest athletes, people like Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods, were not necessarily the most physically gifted from day one, but they were the most teachable. They had a relentless drive to find their weaknesses and turn them into strengths. This perspective on character is empowering because it means grit and resilience are not things you are born with, they are skills you build. Every time you choose to stay with a difficult task, every time you choose to learn from a loss instead of making an excuse, you are building the character of a champion. This applies just as much to the amateur runner or the casual tennis player as it does to the professional. The joy of sports, in a growth mindset, comes from the pursuit of your own personal best, rather than just the score on the board. Now we move to the next point, which focuses on the actual process of transformation, how one moves from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset in their daily life. Changing your mindset is not like flipping a switch. It is a journey that requires awareness and practice. The book outlines a 4-step process for this transition. The first step is to embrace your fixed mindset. We have to acknowledge that we all have a fixed mindset persona inside of us. This is the part of us that feels threatened by criticism, that gets jealous of others' success, and that wants to play it safe. By acknowledging this persona, we can start to watch for the moments when it takes over. The second step is to become aware of your fixed mindset triggers. What situations cause you to feel defensive or discouraged? Is it when you are starting a new project? Is it when you see someone else doing better than you? Is it when you receive feedback from your boss? Once you identify these triggers, you can anticipate the fixed mindset reaction before it happens. The third step is to give your fixed mindset persona a name. This might sound strange, but it helps to create distance between yourself and your fixed mindset reactions. You can call it the perfectionist or the critic or any name that fits. When you feel that surge of anxiety or the urge to quit, you can say, "Oh, there's the critic again, trying to protect me by making me stay small." This externalization makes it easier to ignore the persona's advice. The fourth and final step is to educate that persona. When your fixed mindset says, "Don't try that, you'll look like a fool," you respond with a growth mindset voice, "I might look like a fool at first, but that's how I'm going to learn. If I don't try, I'll never get better." This is an ongoing conversation you have with yourself. Over time, the growth mindset voice becomes stronger and more natural, while the fixed mindset persona becomes a smaller, less influential part of your internal world. Now we move to the next point, which looks at the broader implications of mindset for society and the way we view human potential as a whole. When we look at the history of human achievement, the growth mindset reveals that we often vastly underestimate what people are capable of. Many of the people we now consider geniuses, from Charles Darwin to Jackson Pollock, were not seen as remarkably talented in their youth. There were people who became obsessed with a subject and applied themselves with a level of intensity and duration that others weren't willing to match. The growth mindset suggests that the gap between the average person and the genius is often more about the amount of focused effort and the quality of the strategies used, rather than a difference in innate brain power. This has profound implications for how we structure our societies, especially our education systems. If we believe that intelligence is fixed, we focus on sorting children into the smart group and the not-so-smart group at an early age. This becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if we operate from a growth mindset, our goal shifts to creating environments where everyone can grow. We stop seeing some people as unreachable and start looking for the strategies that will unlock their potential. This isn't about being idealistic or saying everyone can become Einstein. It's about acknowledging that we have no way of knowing how far someone can go if they have the right mindset and the right support. By adopting a growth mindset, we move away from a world of labels and toward a world of possibilities. We stop judging ourselves and others based on where we are right now and start looking at the trajectory of where we are going. It changes the way we see the person struggling at a new skill, the coworker making a mistake, and even our own reflection in the mirror. It replaces the fear of being not enough with the excitement of seeing what we might become. Building on the idea of societal potential, we must look at one of the most common places where mindsets are forged and tested every day, the classroom. While we've touched on how praise affects children, it's equally important to understand the mindset of the teacher or coach. A teacher with a fixed mindset often believes their job is simply to judge students, to determine who is gifted and who is not. They might provide the same material to everyone and then observe who gets it. If a student struggles, the fixed mindset teacher assumes that student simply doesn't have the math brain or the literary talent required. This creates a ceiling for the student, as the teacher's belief in the student's limited potential often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In contrast, a growth mindset teacher believes that their primary role is to develop the student's ability. They don't see a student's current performance as a reflection of their ultimate capacity. Instead, they look for ways to spark interest and find the right strategies to help that student bridge the gap between where they are and where they need to be. These teachers maintain incredibly high standards. They don't dumb down the curriculum or offer false praise to make students feel better. Instead, they say, "I have high standards because I know you can reach them, and I am going to help you get there." This combination of high expectations and high support is the hallmark of growth mindset education. A relatable example is a coach who takes a player who was cut from every other team and, through rigorous training and constant feedback, helps them become a star player. The coach didn't see a bad player, they saw a set of skills that hadn't been developed yet. Now we move to the next point, where we explore a specific phenomenon in the business world that Dweck identifies as CEO disease. This disease is a direct byproduct of a fixed mindset in a position of power. When a leader believes their success is due to their innate genius, they become terrified of anything that might suggest they aren't perfect. This leads them to stop learning and start performing. They spend more time cultivating their image than they do managing their company. These leaders often surround themselves with yes people who reinforce their brilliance and shield them from bad news. Because the leader cannot admit to being wrong, the company cannot correct its course when things go off track. Dweck illustrates this through the stories of famous business leaders. She contrasts those who led their companies into the ground because they were obsessed with their personal legacy and being the smartest person in the room, with leaders who transformed struggling companies by adopting a growth mindset. These successful leaders were often humble and spent more time asking questions than giving orders. They were willing to admit when a strategy wasn't working and were eager to learn from their competitors. While the fixed mindset CEO wants to be the hero of the story, the growth mindset CEO wants to be the architect of a learning organization. This shift in focus, from personal validation to collective growth, is often what determines whether a company survives a crisis or collapses under the weight of its leader's ego. Now we move to the next point, examining the deep-seated myth of the natural and how it distorts our understanding of genius. In our culture, we have a romantic obsession with the natural, the person who can pick up a violin or a basketball and immediately perform with grace. We love the idea of effortless perfection because it feels magical. However, this obsession is deeply rooted in a fixed mindset and can be incredibly damaging. When we value natural talent over earned skill, we discourage people from putting in the work required to become truly great. We make it seem as though if you have to work hard, you don't have what it takes. Dweck's research into some of the world's most naturally talented people reveals a different story. Whether it's a world-class scientist or a virtuoso musician, the genius we see is almost always the result of years of what researchers call deliberate practice. Even the most famous examples of child prodigies, like Mozart, spent thousands of hours practicing and receiving expert instruction before they produced their masterpieces. By peeling back the curtain on the natural, we see that the real secret to greatness isn't a special gene, but a growth mindset that allows someone to dedicate themselves to a craft with intensity and persistence. Understanding this myth is liberating. It means that you don't have to wait for a gift to descend upon you before you can pursue your passions. It means that the naturals you see around you aren't better than you, they may just have a head start or a different history of practice. This perspective encourages us to admire the effort behind the achievement rather than just the achievement itself. It shifts our focus from "can I do this perfectly right now?" to "how much can I improve if I dedicate myself to this over the next year?" Now we move to the next point, which explores the link between mindset and our ability to handle self-control and willpower. Many people view willpower as a fixed resource, something you either have a lot of or you don't. In a fixed mindset, if you fail to stick to a diet or a study schedule, you might conclude that you just don't have the discipline. This makes it easier to give up entirely. If self-control is a fixed trait, then a single failure is proof that you are fundamentally undisciplined. However, the growth mindset views willpower and self-control as skills that can be developed. Research mentioned in the book suggests that people who believe their willpower is an expandable resource actually perform better on difficult tasks than those who believe it is limited. When you have a growth mindset toward your own self-discipline, you don't see a lapse in willpower as a permanent failure. Instead, you see it as a moment where your current strategy failed, and you look for ways to strengthen your discipline muscle for the next time. For example, if someone with a growth mindset is trying to build a new habit and fails for a day, they don't say, "I'm a lazy person." Instead, they analyze the situation. "I was tired and didn't have a plan for that moment. Next time, I'll prepare in advance." This prevents the shame spiral that often follows a setback and keeps the individual focused on the process of improvement. It turns self-discipline from a judgmental label into a practical project of self-engineering. Now we move to the next point, which looks at how mindset affects our emotional health and our susceptibility to depression. The fixed mindset can make setbacks and failures feel catastrophic, which has a direct impact on our mental well-being. When your self-worth is tied to being successful or smart, a failure isn't just a problem to be solved, it's an existential threat. This can lead to a specific type of fixed mindset depression, where an individual feels paralyzed by a sense of worthlessness because they didn't meet their own, or society's, standards of perfection. Because they believe their traits are fixed, they feel there is no way out of their current state. They believe they are broken and will always be that way. In a growth mindset, however, the experience of sadness or disappointment is handled differently. While people with a growth mindset still get depressed and feel the pain of failure, they are more likely to remain active in their recovery. They are more likely to seek help, try new coping strategies, and maintain their daily routines even when they feel low. They see their current emotional state as a difficult season that they can work through, rather than a permanent identity. This resilience comes from the belief that even our emotions and mental habits can change. By viewing depression as a challenge to be managed rather than a definition of who they are, individuals with a growth mindset can navigate the ups and downs of life with a greater sense of agency. They understand that while they may not have control over everything that happens to them, they do have a say in how they respond and grow from those experiences. Now we move to the next point, where we consider the broader cultural impact of these mindsets on our ability to work together and solve complex problems. When we look at group dynamics, whether in a small team, a family, or a whole community, the prevailing mindset dictates how conflict is handled and how progress is made. In a fixed mindset group, people are often more concerned with their rank and status within the group than with the group's actual goals. This leads to a defensive atmosphere where people are afraid to share ideas that might be criticized, or where they take credit for others' work to look smarter. In these environments, the collective intelligence of the group is actually lower than the sum of its parts because so much energy is wasted on ego protection. A growth mindset group, however, operates with the understanding that everyone is there to contribute and to learn. The focus is on the mission rather than the me. In these groups, criticism is welcomed as a tool for improvement, and diverse perspectives are seen as assets because they provide more opportunities for learning. This creates a psychological safety that allows for true innovation. People are willing to admit what they don't know, which paradoxically leads to the group becoming much more knowledgeable and effective over time. This cultural shift is essential for solving the complex, long-term problems facing our world. If we approach challenges with a fixed mindset, believing that certain people are inherently better than others or that things have always been this way, we stay stuck. But if we approach our shared challenges with a growth mindset, we open the door to collaboration and new solutions. We start to see potential in people and places we previously ignored. We begin to understand that our collective intelligence is not a fixed quantity, but something we can grow together through open-mindedness and shared effort. As we draw our exploration to a close, it is important to reflect on the core realization that sits at the center of this journey. The transition from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset is not a destination you arrive at, but a continuous practice of choosing how you view your own potential and the potential of those around you. We have seen how the belief that our qualities are carved in stone creates a world of judgment, where every challenge is a threat and every failure is a permanent label. But we have also seen the alternative, a world where qualities are cultivated through effort, where challenges are welcomed as the very engine of growth, and where failure is simply a part of the learning process. The work of Carol S. Dweck teaches us that the path to a growth mindset begins with a simple but profound shift in perspective. It's the realization that not being able to do something is not a permanent state, it is simply a not yet. When we add the word yet to our setbacks, we change the entire narrative of our lives. We move away from the exhausting need to prove ourselves and toward the fulfilling pursuit of improving ourselves. This shift doesn't just change our personal achievements, it changes our relationships, our leadership styles, and our ability to contribute to the world in a meaningful way. It is helpful to remember that no one possesses a growth mindset in every area of their life all the time. We are all a mixture of both. There will be moments when your fixed mindset persona, that internal voice that fears criticism and avoids risks, speaks up. The goal isn't to silence that voice entirely, but to recognize it, understand its triggers, and choose to listen to the growth-oriented voice instead. By treating your own development as a work in progress, you give yourself the grace to make mistakes and the courage to keep moving forward. As you move back into your daily life, consider the areas where you might be holding yourself back with a fixed mindset. Where are you avoiding a challenge because you're afraid of looking not smart? Where are you viewing a relationship as a finished product rather than a shared journey? By applying these principles, you unlock a version of yourself that is more resilient, more curious, and ultimately, more capable than you might have ever imagined. The power to change your mindset is the power to change the trajectory of your entire life. It is a journey that requires patience and persistence, but as we've seen, the rewards of a growth mindset are well worth the effort. Thank you for taking this time to explore the psychology of success and the incredible potential that lies within the simple choice to grow.